We are proud to add Tom Clancy's name to the list of distinguished Americans who are recipients of the Harry S. Truman Good Neighbor Award. We know that Mr. Truman, an avid student of history, would heartily approve of our selection of Mr. Clancy this year. So, Mr. Clancy, would you please step up here?
Ladies and gentlemen, thanks for inviting me. President Truman was the first president in my lifetime, although I was really too young to appreciate it at the time. I suppose I should start off with one of my government jokes. And Rabbi Mike earlier today talked about Moses and the Red Sea, and what really happened is Moses looked up to the sky and said, "Lord," and God said, "What is it now, Moses?" And Moses says, "Lord, we got a problem. The Pharaoh, Ramses, he changed his mind. And he sent his whole army behind us, and they're like pushing us into the sea." And God thought about that for a second and said, "Okay, Moses, you want the good news or the bad news?" Moses, being practical, said, "Lord, the good news first, if you please." And God said, "All right, tell you what, I'm going to put a pillar of fire in front of the Egyptian host, and that's going to stop them. Then I'm going to part the Red Sea. And then you lead the children of Israel through the dry spot to the other side, and I'll take the pillar of fire away, and those dumb Egyptians are going to run right behind you. I'm going to put the water on top of them. This is going to end the problem you have with Pharaoh." Moses says, "Gee, Lord, that's great. What's the bad news?" God said, "You have to do the environmental impact statement." We celebrate today the identity, the name, the history of our 33rd president. What kind of a man was Harry Truman? Well, for one thing, you trust your daughter around him. So, he was, in many ways, an ordinary man, from middle America. He was not one of the professional ruling class that we've unfortunately evolved since then. He was a man who wasn't supposed to be president. He was picked to be vice president through a process that's never been clear to me. But FDR wanted him, and what FDR wanted, FDR got. He was regarded upon his election to the Senate earlier as the senator from Prendergast, from the Democratic machine that then existed here in Missouri. And yet when he got to Washington, he became something else. He became something kind of special. And maybe that's why FDR picked him. And then when he became president, he'd been so far left out of the system that he hadn't even been briefed on the atomic bomb project until after he became president, a weapon he would later use, to the discomfort of some historians, to the great comfort of my father, who was an anti-aircraft gunner on a Navy destroyer at the time and didn't really want to get that close to Japan. And with the kamikazes and everything coming down, he just didn't think it was career enhancing. Of course he did the right thing. Is there anybody here who doubts that? He undoubtedly never wished to become president. You have to be a little crazy to want the job. With all due respect, Mr. Ford. Well, some are crazier than most, and Jerry Ford's an awfully good guy. He was an ordinary man faced with extraordinary duties, which had not arrived on his doorstep at his own choosing. And yet he did the best he could. Harry Truman used to tell a story about a tombstone he saw. Here lies, Joe Blokes did his damnedest. That's all a man can do. Well, Harry Truman did his damnedest. Was he always right? No, he was a human being. Human beings make mistakes. But I don't think even Harry Truman's bitterest political enemies ever questioned his honor. They never questioned his patriotism. He once wore our country's uniform and went off to get shot at for us. It was unfortunately his duty to send other Americans off to get shot at for us. He was a man of great common sense, or who certainly tried to apply common sense rather than the artsy-fartsy political theory that you get so often from professional politicians now. Those people who think that we should do what they tell us to do because they're so much smarter than we are. Uh-huh. Um, Harry Truman was, he was every man. He was every American in that sense. He was a man of considerable temper, as a certain music critic in Washington found out once. I mean, you all know that story. And he was very much, they say in Ireland they have a special kind of Alzheimer's disease. You forget everything but your grudges. Harry Truman, in that sense, was a very Irish gentleman. I don't think he ever forgot a grudge either. So what? So he was a human being, like the rest of us. When a man becomes president, he's not anointed by God. He's selected by the constitutional process. And he does the best he can, if he's any kind of a man at all. Most of them have been, unfortunately not all. But Harry Truman is a gentleman who will be remembered well by historians. In establishing the containment of communism, in giving his blessing and backing to the Marshall Plan, which saved Western Europe from communist domination, in creating the NATO alliance, which still exists, and the Warsaw Pact, that ain't there no more. He began the process which ended the Third World War. He was there at the very end of the Second. The Third World War was the greatest of all. It was the finals. Which political idea is going to run the world? Liberal democracy or Marxism-Leninism? Well, the good guys won. President Reagan will probably be remembered by historians as the guy who really dealt the last hand that went down on the table, and we had a straight flush, and they had a pair of trays. But Truman is one of the guys who got the process started, who believed in the idea of America. He was the first president to integrate the military. Oh, by the way, black people are allowed to fight for their country too. Back when that wasn't really fashionable. And as I recall, Missouri was a slave state during the Civil War. So his traditions did not point him in that direction, and yet he respected the idea of America, and he respected the idea of our constitutional system enough to break with whatever traditions he may have grown up with. He was a man who believed in justice, and he was a man you could trust your daughter around. All in all, it's not a bad legacy for one man who never wanted to be president, got stuck with a job anyway. All in all, it's not a bad standard for any of us to try to live up to. So I'm very pleased and honored indeed that you invited me here to accept an award named for this great American, after whom we just named an aircraft carrier. And I guess in the future, it wouldn't hurt to have a few more like him. A citizen who went to high office, did his best, and left. And came back to his roots and to his home and to his family, write his memoirs, continue his grudges, and to honor the country which elevated him. Thank you.